I guess that means we're on. Good evening, everybody. I am Matt. I am the 63-year-old newcomer, also known as the stinking drunk. Um, my sobriety date is May 14th of 2024, so 8 months and 8 days ago, pretty much. Um, and it's been an interesting journey. I had a long career. Um, I'm going to start with something out of the big book, the traditional big book, just because it's been on my mind lately, and because I'm around a lot of people that have a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to read. I'm going to read the little acceptance bit. I hope everybody will bear with me for a moment. An acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. Thank you very much. And you can take the God line out of there, and the message is still the same for those, however you feel and believe and all of that. Yeah, I know that anytime I'm jacked up, it's something between my ears because I'm not reacting properly to something that's going on around me, right? And letting something push me out of shape. So it is an honor to be speaking here with everybody tonight, man. I can't believe this crowd. Beck asked me, and I don't say no. I'm here in the meeting always anyway, and I appreciate all of you. And it's really an honor to be asked to speak at this meeting. Some of you have heard parts of my story before. I'm just basically going to follow the outline that Beck sent me, so we can just kind of roll through it. And I got a timer going, so hopefully we'll kind of line this stuff up. So I grew up in Carson City, Nevada. I know we've got a couple of people in that neighborhood. So that's my home country, desert, kind of small town, rural stuff. Um, Early days was pretty Ozzy and Harriet. I'm the youngest of seven kids. And when I was born, they were still all in the house. There's 6 years between me and the next one up exactly. We even have the same birthday. And he still holds a grudge to this day for me ruining his sixth birthday party. Uh, it was a crowded, busy house when I was young. Shared bedrooms and the whole bit. We had it going on. Being kind of out in the country on the side of town, we were outdoors constantly. I mean, it was, you left the house after, at sunup, and you just as long as you were home in time for dinner or home before dark, it was all good. Um, I mean, from the age of 8, 9 years old, you'd stuff one pocket full of 22 shells and another pocket full of dried apricots and grab the 22 rifle and head out into the sagebrush. You'd be gone all friggin' day. We'd just be gone all day. Kids with guns. It was great. It was a great way to grow up. Kids today don't know what they're missing. Well, the kids with guns is a little different now. I live in the city and it still happens, but it's a little different. So that part of life, family was really good. My siblings are all great. We're all still very close today. Um, Most of my siblings are all straight A students, angels all the way through school. The youngest girl and me, the youngest boy, were the troublemakers of the bunch. Uh, we were the ones that had issues. Early memories of family were pretty awesome. Dad was an alcoholic. He was one of us. He was a binger, and he would go out over periods of time and drink himself all the way into the hospital and have to go through detox and all of that, and then come back home. And then he'd be good for a period of years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever. I can only remember a handful of times him being on a bender. So it wasn't a lot. Wasn't a lot. It wasn't like it was a constant thing in our home. But it did happen, and I saw the guys come in and pull all the vodka bottles out of the house, out of the closets, under the beds, and all of that. So I was exposed to that kind of thing, and I knew, that AA existed. I had an idea what it was from a very early age. Um, our hobbies and activities. Most of my older siblings got into hunting. Dad was a hunter, so it was a lot of deer hunting and that kind of thing, and ducks and that kind of stuff. Kind of went with the neighborhood. Um, with a family that size, it was part of putting food on the table. It wasn't just for fun and games. I was a little young for that, but did a lot of fishing. We did a lot of camping and a lot of fishing, stream fishing, small streams for trout and that kind of thing. And just being outdoors with the family was always a great time. Um, Early experiences. You know, we as a big family. My parents are both from big families. Family gatherings were always big. Thanksgiving, Christmas were always huge. The aunts and uncles, always big parties. Always lots of alcohol out. You know, I'd be bartending for my aunts and uncles when I was 8, 10 years old, that kind of thing. So alcohol was around. Um, there was none of the, you know, my dad was the only one that drank himself into the hospital that I know of. But during those events, you know, there was a lot of drinking going on, and every family has the overachiever to each generation, right? And I'm definitely the overachiever of my generation when it comes to that. Um, I didn't really have any feelings about it one way or another, to be honest. Um, didn't I didn't try drinking in those events when I was young. That just, you know, I had lots of cousins around and we had lots of activities and we were doing our own thing. And there was just a ton of love with a big family like that. All the cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents. It was pretty Ozzie and Harriet. I was extremely fortunate in that regard. Um, uh, School years, man, young school years. Um, I've always been kind of a loner, being 6 years younger than the next sibling up. We weren't exactly pals. I was a real nuisance to him. I tended to hang out with some other kids in the neighborhood that were just a little bit older than me. I didn't really, you know, I didn't really have a crowd, and I wasn't the type to worry about fitting in with a crowd. I didn't go out of my way to fit in. I wasn't a studious kid. To be honest, looking back on it, I'm pretty sure I had a learning disability of some kind, ADD or HD or something that went undiagnosed. I don't know, but uh, was never into that. I never got into band or athletics or any of those kind of things in school. So you know, I didn't really have any of that kind of thing. I had one small group of friends from my neighborhood that we all hung out, and that was about it. Once we got into high school, we got into just cutting school a lot. I was that kid that could come in on Monday morning and get the assignments and then disappear for the rest of the week and come back on Friday and ace the quizzes. But I never turned in any homework. I couldn't do homework to save my ass. It was, I don't know what would happen. I'd sit down at the kitchen table and it would just blank. It would be like reading Chinese or something, man. Mom could help me sometimes, and she was the only one that could. But yeah, the teachers and the other students didn't care for me much in high school. Um, Shortly before my 17th birthday, I was called down to the office and my mom was there. This was on one of the rare days that I did show up for school. And my mom was already there waiting for me, and the papers were already signed. As of my 17th birthday, they were no longer going to reserve my seat since I wasn't using it that much anyway. They thought maybe it would be, you know, go to better use, I suppose. Um, and I knew I had been exposed to drinking about by then. One of those older neighbor kids that I hung out with. Um, I don't know if it was summertime. I don't remember for sure. Probably got into his old car and went and hung out down by the river drinking beers, you know, probably Coors or Oli or something like that. And that was cool. And pretty soon we were hanging out at his brother's apartment, and it was full on overdone right off the bat. You know, passed out on the sidewalk out in front of the house. Somebody called the sheriffs. Had to get stuffed in a closet while they dealt with that. All that kind of thing. And I couldn't wait to do it again. um, that was my that was my early exposure. Didn't do a lot of drinking as a young teen. Uh, you know, me and my buddy would shoulder tap once in a while, but there wasn't much of that. Um, at age 17, after I got booted from high school, I knew I needed some discipline, and mom and dad were probably not really up to the task. So I decided that joining the Air Force would be a really good idea. There's it was kind of like going off to summer camp, and you got paid, and they made sure you had food and a bed and all that kind of stuff. So that was all kind of good. And there were some other opportunities that went along with that. Well, what I soon found out once I got to my assignment in the Panhandle of Florida that drinking age was 18, but at 17 nobody really cared. And if you were in the military, they just assumed you were 18, so it was wide open. They still had drive-through liquor stores at that time down there. You drive-in daiquiri stands, man. You drive through, they'd give you big old daiquiris right through the window. Here you go cruising. It was kind of fun. Um, Drinking was pretty much an Olympic sport there. It was on at age 17. Me and my buddies that were brand new. Everybody was really young, and we were the Air Force security. We were the guys keeping the place safe. God, it was crazy. Wonder I survived that place. Panama City Beach, what a place, man. Had a lot of good times. Drank way too much. Drove intoxicated. Did all the things. There were some chemicals introduced at that time. Um, there was hash under glass. That was a thing back in that era. I don't know if anybody did that one. That was always fun. Um, a lot of uppers. I wasn't interested in anything that put me down. So I never acquired a taste for grass because it just made me want to go to sleep. But that was quite a time. That was a short stint, 2 years back home to Nevada. Um, had worked around a couple of jobs, found my way into the hotel industry. Northern Nevada has all the casinos and hotels and all of that stuff. And I wound up working for one of the big hotels in Lake Tahoe in the food department. Uh, Eventually transferred. They had a huge automobile collection in Sparks, Nevada, with thousands of cars on display. It was definitely a huge toy box, and I was definitely in it. I was a car guy, and that was a really cool thing. Anybody that remembers Harrah's automobile collection was a fantastic place. Um, we worked 4 10-hour shifts there, so we had Friday off. Well, at the end of the shift on Thursday, everybody migrated into the bar because we had our own bar out there, and we would just get hammered. And then I would drive my '67 Mustang back to Carson City, blacked out half the time, about every other week. It's a wonder I made it, but I made it. Um, and But it was a fun job for a while. Just didn't pay shit. I wound up transferring downtown, working in the casinos, valet parking, making cash money. That was good. As soon as I turned 21, I worked my way into a poker dealer job. Uh, that was fun. Poker dealer in Reno in the early '80s, in the era of hookers and blow, and there was all kinds of entertainment going on then. We would work a late swing shift where you'd start at 8 or 9 at night and work until 4 or 5 in the morning, get off, sit at the bar, start pounding cocktails. If it was wintertime, you were drinking Baileys and coffee, so you were a wide awake drunk, and plinking your tip money back in the poker machines. And then once the sun came out, if it was summertime, we'd be headed out to the lake, or if it was wintertime, we'd be headed for the slopes, and maybe get home in time to do a couple lines and change clothes and start over again. It was quite a racket. It was a crazy time. Definitely maximized the effort during that time period. Let me tell you, I went to a lot of concerts that I can't remember. I know I saw Rush Moving Pictures tour. I saw Billy Idol in that era. I saw Pat Benatar and Joan Jett and a few others, and I only remember bits and pieces of most of them. Uh, Rush and Billy Idol, I remember pretty well. I wasn't quite as messed up with them. Um, but yeah, it was a good time to be in Reno, but I knew I needed out of there. That was not going to be a sustainable life for Maddie. So I was looking for an excuse to do a geographic, and in walked a girl. Showed up at my house one day with a friend of hers, a mutual friend, who had come by to see me, and all it took was one look, and I was smitten, and told my brother, I said, I got to get me some of that. That was the line back then for any of you young kids, right? Um, She came back a couple weeks later, and we went on our first date. She came back with another mutual friend who was a young man who had a classic '65 Mustang. And anybody that's familiar with Reno knows there's a place outside of town called Mustang Ranch, and it's a large bordello, and he wanted to go there, so we took him. His credit card got declined. Poor kid. So we made arrangements. The next night, we took him to another establishment that somebody told me about. Okay, I may have an autographed T-shirt in the bottom of a drawer somewhere. Um, and I was going to take my wife in, my now wife, my date at that time. We were just going to sit at the bar and have a drink while our friend got his yayas, but they wouldn't let her in. Back in that day, they wouldn't let girls in the cat house. They said, you don't bring a date to a cat house. So we sat out in the car and steamed up the windows. That was my first date with my now wife of 37 years. How's that? Took my wife to a cat house for our first date. Um, Back to the alcohol story. Warning signs early on. I mean, that drinking that started in the Air Force. I mean, I was drinking like it was an Olympic sport. You know, it was there was blackout drinking from day one, and it was constant. I mean, we fired for effect every time we opened a bottle. Our work shifts were you worked three swing shifts, three graveyards, and had 3 days off. And at the end of the graveyard shift, your last graveyard shift was a huge party in the dorm. We made what they called Congo punch back then. I forget what everybody calls it now, but you know, everybody just dumps bottles in the bucket, garbage can with a liner, and we just got hammered. Everybody did. I mean, it was a rare occasion if there wasn't piles of puke all over the dorm the next day. But that was just, I mean, that was it. So warning signs? No, that was just everybody around me was drinking the same way. So why would I be concerned? So denial, justification, there was no need to deny that, you know? Were others worried? Not really, because they were drinking like I did back then. And we were kids, 17, 18 years old, on our own for the first time. People from, you know, we were from all over the country. It was quite an environment, you know? It was quite an environment. Setbacks and challenges. Well, there was that DUI when I was 21. Crashed a car. That was when I was doing my poker dealer thing. Fun, yeah, not funny, not funny story. My mom was being treated for cancer, and I went out one night to see a band called Soft White Underbelly. If anybody knows who that is Blue Oyster Cult's small club name. When they play in a small nightclub, that's the name they use. Um, and I left the house with $20 because I didn't want to get in trouble. Turned out I met somebody there that decided they needed to buy me Jack Daniels all night. I wound up wrecking my car on the way home, and I actually went through a brick wall that belonged to the doctor who was treating my mom's cancer. That was really good. That made a lot of points with mom. Um, I continued. My life has been overindulgent, self-centered party drinking the whole time. I thought I was this great guy. I got married, had kids. I worked hard. I never made a lot of money, but I worked weekends. I did what I had to do to make enough money so that my wife could stay home and take care of the kids. And I really thought I was a hero for doing that, right? Um, we lived a pretty modest life, but it was enough. And so when I did have spare time, it was my time, and I was drinking and partying with my buds. I was out carousing. I had a brother. We used to hit air shows. There were all kinds of unsavory things that I'm not terribly proud of today. Um, but we all have a past, right? And I did that for years and years and years. I would take vacations by myself without my wife. You know, I would go away and do things. I traveled for trade shows for work. Those were always drunk fests. All kinds of shit goes on. So, you know, now I'm drinking for at work related functions, and I'm overindulging. That was a lot of fun. Um, but this went on for a long time. Late 22, things started to change for me. Um, I started to see some issues coming with my job. My 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 employer is my oldest brother and his wife. Um, my that particular brother, he's a half brother. He's 25 years older than me, so he's 87 today, and he'll be 88 in a couple of weeks. I could see that they had not made any preparation for any succession in this business. And we were kind of headed with no rudder, there was nothing, there were no plans. I have a nephew, their son, 40 years old, and they were not preparing him to take over the business. There was no talk of selling the business. A lot of very uncertainty, but I couldn't really say anything to anybody. I couldn't talk to my boss about it because I knew where they were at. They just couldn't let go, or they would have trained their son years ago. I couldn't talk to my other siblings about it because if they said something back to the brother that I worked for, that would be a problem. I couldn't say anything to my wife because I didn't want to distress her. I really didn't have anybody I could talk to about it. And I bottled that up. And that started creating a lot of stress. And it was a high stress work environment in the first place. And it just built up and built up. And I started really drinking to numb that stress. That was probably earlier than 22. That was probably maybe late 20 or 21 sometime. In late 22, we had to move my mother-in-law in. She's was starting to have signs of dementia, could no longer live on her own. There wasn't enough money to put her into any kind of a professional facility. My wife's brothers they all kind of got together with my wife and determined that because we have a little in-law unit, we were the best equipped to take care of it. My wife is the only daughter, and she was willing to do it, so we moved her in. Unfortunately, the in-law unit that we have here, this is a modest little old house. This is a little old 2-bedroom house, but it got a converted garage unit out back. It's nothing fancy, folks. That in-law unit used to be an Airbnb, and that was an extra source of income for us. That was all our fun money for trips and for everybody knows I'm into flying, right? I'm an aviation guy. I got my pilot's license. I've flown at the Reno air races a few times. Done the air racing thing, done aerobatics, do all of that, and the Airbnb money funded all of that. Plus, put some money in the house, into the main account for bills and things like that. So we had extra money in cushion. Well, mother-in-law moving in did away with all of that, so that added some financial pressure, more drinking, and this built up and built up and built up. Late 22, early 23. I never missed work. I was always a functional alcoholic, right? I can count on my fingers the number of Mondays that I missed. Now, did I show up hungover plenty of times? Sure. And as I started drinking more and more towards those later years, there was weekday drinking and that kind of thing too. I mean, in the evening, so I'd come in hungover on a weekday. Fridays I would leave for lunch and not come back because I was getting ripped at lunch on Fridays. But then I worked on the weekend. So there was all of that. So early 23, I did start attending meetings. I started Zooming meetings first and local meetings, traditional stuff. And I found one that I kind of liked. It had a really eclectic mix of people, all ages, all kinds of sobriety, all kinds of backgrounds. They talked about all their other addictions besides just alcohol. Seemed to be a pretty open group. And I finally started doing in-person meetings there. Now, even at that, I had no intention of quitting permanently because I didn't know anybody that did that. But I knew with what was coming with work and with my mother-in-law situation and all that, I needed to not drink for a while. I needed to at least sober up for a few years while we got through all of this stuff. And then maybe I'd get, another 3 years, 5 years down the road, I'd be ready to retire and I could go back to my normal life. So I started attending meetings and I made no bones about telling people, hey, I'm just here to not drink for now. I'd get up to the podium and I'd announce myself as the self-sponsored agnostic, which would make them crazy, and I would just point them out. I'm like, I'm just using all you so that I won't drink right now because I don't want to drink right now. And they were all okay with it. They just, the old timers would tell me, just keep coming back. It was kind of crazy. They tolerated my shit. And I had some vacations in 23 and 24. I had some vacations planned. And when I went on vacation, I went on vacation, it was not field research. It wasn't me going out. It wasn't a slip. It was an intentional vacation. And I let myself drink and consume. And each time I did that, it was over the top, out of control. way overdone. I always overshot the mark. Always, always, always. Fire for effect, right? Um, After my last vacation in 24, um, that was April, late April. I came back, and on May 1st, my sister-in-law that I worked for died. Uh, we were very close. We shared an office. I worked for her for 36 years, and we shared an office for 20. And we were really close. She had a very rapid decline in the last couple of months of her life. Uh, in the last month of her life, they had just started her on chemo, and 10 days later, she was dead. Uh, it attacked her heart, and it was very, very rapid and unexpected. And it was very difficult. And part of the hard part was we couldn't let any of the coworkers know what had happened. I mean, they knew about her disease and that kind of thing, but they didn't know how progressed it was. They didn't know how dire it was, and we couldn't tell them that you know our leader. She was the driving force of the company. We couldn't tell anybody that she had suddenly passed away. So we kept that bottled up. I did not drink, and I told my brother and my nephew that I work with that that the alcohol would not be a problem. I could hold it in. I could hold it in. They knew I was a drinker. They knew my situation, and I told them I was not going to let this be an issue in that situation. Um, and I held it together for a week or two. It was two, almost not quite 2 weeks. Once word got out, we started telling people. Um, the weekend it would have been about a week and a half after. Uh, I let myself go on the Friday going into that weekend, and it wasn't intended to be a weekend bender. It was just the stress of the weekend, the stress of all of the things, and everybody. The word was finally out, and I was finally going to just let it go. And I came home and I cracked a bottle of whiskey, and it was just going to be a couple of drinks on the rocks, and relax and breathe. And I don't know how many empty bottles there were Monday morning, um, but there were a lot, and I was still drinking. And then, uh, and my wife had made the comment over that weekend that if I wanted to kill myself, I was welcome to do so, but she didn't really want to watch. Um, Her dad was also an alcoholic, so she'd seen this movie before. Then I'm getting calls from work. It's Monday, and I'm not coming in. And unfortunately, there's some paperwork that has to be signed, and I'm the only person in the company that has to sign it, and they have to be signed that day. And my options were to have who I affectionately call my work wife come to my home in that condition, or have my wife drive me to work to take care of that business. And for whatever reason, I didn't want anybody in my home. I didn't want anybody near this place. I didn't want anybody in here. So it seemed like a really good idea for me to go to work just fucking hammered, and obviously looking like I'd been on a 4-day bender. So I went into my office, and all my coworkers got to see me in all my glory, and which included a couple of new gals that had just been hired within the last month. And I did what I had to do. I signed the papers very illegibly. Uh, I blubbered all over my nephew that was there, who I had just promised I wasn't going to let the alcohol be a problem during this whole situation. Kind of hugged it out with him, apologized, and had my wife take me home. That was my pit of demoralization. At that moment, the desire to drink was removed from me, and I have not had a desire to have a drink since that moment. I did not cry out to God for help. There was none of that. There was none of the get me out of this and I'll never do this again. I need help. There was none of that. There was a recognition of the pit that I was in, and that there was no other way out, and that it had to stop. And in that moment, it was gone. So that's a spiritual experience for a total agnostic. Um, that was the low point. That was my last drink. That was my low point. Um, and that's 30 minutes. So I didn't hide my drinking a whole lot. There were times around home when I would hide it, but most of the time there was a handle of vodka on the kitchen table. Like most people would have a pitcher of water, and I would just take a swig or two every time I walked by. My wife knew what I was up to. I didn't even talk about my poor kids. I was present but not present. I made every soccer game. I made every band practice, every band performance. We did the trips to Disneyland. We did all those things, but I sure wasn't very present for them. Those are some of my biggest regrets, things that you can't go back and fix. My kids are adults these days. They're 35 and 30, long gone. Um, the 35-year-old has nothing to do with me. The 30-year-old at least communicates with me a little bit. She's a sweetie. She lives in Manhattan on the island. Um, I hid my drinking a little bit from work, although anybody that was paying attention certainly would have known. Um, towards the end, there were occasions when there would be a bottle in a file cabinet. But it wasn't, going out to lunch and having two or three belts at lunch was not terribly uncommon. Uh, so that was my turning point. Then I got to the meetings and things changed. Now I was taking a different point of view, and I was more serious. Now the God thing in the traditional meetings started to get to me, because before I didn't care. I didn't give a shit because I wasn't a permanent thing anyway, right? So I could just blow it off. But now I care, and now it kind of bothers me when somebody gets up to the podium and starts preaching. There were people who would speak at meetings. I go to meetings with a lot of old timers, and we all know there's parts of the book that are very religious. And I started feeling like, man, some of these people make me feel like if I don't start breaking out in cold sweats and speaking in tongues, man, there's no hope for me. But I knew that in this day and age, that just couldn't possibly be true. You know, I just kept doing my thing. I kept telling them I was a self-sponsored agnostic, and I started looking for secular AA, not even knowing that it existed. I just started Googling and finding some things. I found the Worldwide Secular Meetings Directory, and eventually I found this meeting where I've been hanging out now for probably 5 months or so, 4 or 5 months. Been a good time. I've gotten really to know a lot of people in this group. I love it, and this was a game changer for me. I still do my traditional meetings in person and on Zoom. I'm in service. Um, I secretary a meeting on Tuesday nights at my in-person meeting. It's a big meeting with a lot of old timers, and we have a great time. I love that we talk about it as recovery versus sobriety, because there's a difference, right? One is just abstinence, and one is where we actually work on ourselves. And I knew I needed that, and step four, doing the inventory, 8 and 9, cleaning my side of the street. I had started doing step 10 basically before I even knew what the steps were. Every day thinking about my day and trying to recall, places where things went well and things didn't, and kind of doing those things. I had gotten in the habit of apologizing when I screwed up, uh, uh, before I'd ever gotten around to the steps and knew what they were. So I was already doing some of those things. Once I turned the corner, I already had a good knowledge and toolkit that I could put into motion and change some habits. And life is different today. I meditate every morning. I have quiet time, reflection. I think about my day. I stretch, and and I start my day very calm. My first 45 minutes of my day is very chill. So when I get to work, I'm not already an uptight prick. It takes a while to get there, but I'm not as reactive as I used to be in the work situations. And that's been a huge benefit. I'm not reactive at home. I mean, God, my poor wife. I used to come home, and if there were dirty dishes in the sink, I'd just be all up in my shit. I'd be, what the fuck? I'm working, busting my ass all day. You can't at least load the dishwasher. God, I was so entitled. I was a self-centered, entitled, arrogant, judgmental, narcissistic prick for so many years. I can't believe it. I got a lot of making up to do in there. I have a lot of making up to do. I don't really have any huge, the 12 steps. That's what we were just talking about. People I have to explain in my traditional meetings, the difference between religion and spirituality. Um, anytime I'm in traditional meetings, I speak up for secular, and I don't do it in an argumentative way. I do it um, so that the newcomer or even somebody that's been in a while who isn't aware that secular AA exists can learn about it and can know that there's, if they're hung up on all the religion in the traditional AA, there is another way, and it's okay, you know. Um, and even in the traditional meetings I go to, they've gotten so used to me and the way I speak that I don't even get any more grief about it. I did early on. I'd have people give me a hard time, but once in a while early on, but in the last 2 3 months, nobody barks at it when I bring it up anymore. I point out that there's a literature rack right over there with a pamphlet in it called the God Word that talks all about atheists and agnostics, and not pushing our beliefs on any newcomer or anybody. Everybody. AA doesn't require you to believe shit. And we shouldn't push anybody to believe something specific. You know, everybody should be welcome, and you should be free to believe or not believe as you see fit, whatever makes sense to you. So I do that. Um, Biggest challenges in staying sober for me right now, I don't really have any because I'm really immersed in my program. I do like 4 meetings a day, and this is one you guys see me. I'm here pretty much every day, pretty much every night. This is when I'm doing my journaling and that kind of thing. So I'm here every night. Up until very recently, I had a stocked liquor cabinet right around the corner. I just finally emptied it out just a couple of weeks ago, just because there was no need. When family comes around, they'll come back out, and I'll let the family have at it. That isn't going to bother me at all. So I don't really have those things. And when it comes to the tools and practices, like we talked about, I meditate, I have reflection time, I think about my day, and at the end of the day, I do that inventory, uh, a little more reflection, gratitude. I try to always be in a place of gratitude. I don't do gratitude lists like a lot of people do. I should, uh, but I don't do that. But those are the things. And when I'm at work and something happens and I get wound up, I just put everything down and I go for a walk. I leave my phone on the desk and I go for a little walk and I clear my head. And if I got too much stuff bouncing around in here, I will count my steps out loud while I'm walking, so I can't be thinking about all that other crap. Um, and I will do that. Uh, specific milestones since I began this journey. I didn't drink today. How about that? I'm going to go to bed sober. So that means I'll wake up sober tomorrow and we can try it again. Um, I'm really, really, really fortunate that it's been as easy as it has been. And the fellowship is an enormous part of that. This group is huge for me. Uh, and my other traditional groups. I've got some great people that I've come to know and hang out with, and that energy, that's the energy greater than myself, is the fellowship that supports me and has helped me so much on this journey. Um, I'm also really extremely fortunate that I haven't, completely blown up in the universe and burned my house down. I have a nice, I have a decent home. I have my wife of 37 years. I have my job of 36 years. I got the cars. I got, the stuff. You know, I may have strained relationships with my children because of my drinking. No question about that. And I'm working on that. But right now I'm working on my 8th step, and looking forward to the amends. I really don't have a whole lot there because I wasn't doing a lot of the real hardcore out there shit, right? I definitely did some things that hurt some people, but there are a lot of them that they're the kind of amends you don't go back and reopen the wounds, if you know what I mean. So it's uh, most of my stuff is living amends, and my biggest resentments are towards myself. So that's where that's at. And why do I keep going? Because it is worth it. I keep going because my wife deserves it. I've got a lot of making up to do to her. I need to treat her for the rest of our days the way I should have been treating her for the last 30. That's why I keep doing it. For the newcomers or somebody that's struggling, what they told me when I first came was keep coming back. Just keep coming back. Even when I squawked about the God shit and the religion, they tell me just keep coming back. And if you don't like this meeting, go to another one. Keep going to different meetings until you find one that you like. You know, whether it's secular or traditional or what, life ring, whatever it is. Um, there's a lot of meetings in the Zoomiverse. There's bajillions of meetings, but in person, I'm here in Silicon Valley in California, where we're really fortunate to have tons of meetings all day long around here. You can always find a meeting in this valley. Um, so I go to a lot of meetings. Like I said, it's like 4 a day, pretty much. And I don't drink between my meetings, and that helps a lot. I help others. I'm in service. I secretary. I moderate on a couple of Zoom groups, and I do those kind of things. I'm just super plugged in and working steps with a sponsor. I funny thing back to sorry to run over probably, but I always swore I would never get one of those old guy sponsors that had decades of sobriety. And sure enough, my sponsor is an 83-year-old dude with 42 years of sobriety. It's just funny. But we just happened to click. We had some common background. He was a security guy in the Air Force. And so we had that common background. And he's a pilot. So we just happened to click and it worked. And he's totally cool with my agnostic secular deal. So that's enough of my rambling. You guys have heard me for too long. People thought I couldn't do 40 minutes. Oh my God. Thanks for your patience. I hope everybody didn't fall asleep. My name is Matt. I'm a for sure legit alcoholic, and it's been an honor to be here and be in service of this meeting tonight. Thank you, Beck, for asking me.